going to recreate an early 1950s mysterious movie which was shot along Kensington High Street and the Phillimore Gardens area from the back of a lorry, and it's a bit mysterious. People think it was a film crew scouting for locations, but it really shows the streets of London in the early 50s, and it's quite a marvellous movie. So we're now looking in the opposite direction from where High Street Kensington station was. And in the first section of the video I'm going to concentrate on the 1953 movie. But first of all I need to get us to the location where the old movie picks up the action. And that's on the corner of Kensington High Street and Argyle Road. And here we are. The 1953 filming begins on the back of a lorry positioned around about here and pointing back in this direction. Matters are slightly confused by the issue that the postbox has moved across the road since the 1950s. But even though the 1953 two panes of glass has been replaced with one shop window in the modern days, the brown brick surrounding a top window confirms this location. So there's the moved postbox and one of the fine old stores of London, C&A, sadly missed. The film crew in 1953 filmed along the north side of Kensington High Street and turned into Phillimore Gardens, and then filmed from exactly the same location but focusing on the south side of the High Street, so that's what you're going to see. We'll make the turn into Phillimore Gardens. And we'll now pick up the location outside C&A, but on the opposite side of the road, if you see what I mean. Get out of it! Lorry drivers haven't changed in the intervening years. And Boots is followed by Woolworths, as it did all over London. They seem to crop up together. But what is also changed in the modern high street are the number of independent shops. So again, as the Britvic lorry speeds past, we're going to turn into Phillimore Gardens with the camera pointing the other direction. But this time, instead of showing you two separate shots along the street, I'm going to mix up both sides of the street as we pass up the road here. There's a small park here and some fantastic cars. Expressed there is Milkman. Some very fashionable people walking the streets. There's a man with his dog. We travel quite a long way up the street before turning into Upper Phillimore Gardens. And again we'll look at both sides of the road as we turn. Before mysteriously the 1953 film crew on both sides of the road come to a gradual halt. And on the other side of the road this Glass structure, as we'll see later, still exists. I'm splitting this video into 3 sections. In part 1 we saw some of the old movie. In part 2, well, it'll take 20 minutes to walk to Notting Hill Gate Station, and it's such a nice day that I'll keep the camera running for the whole walk through some very rich Kensington streets. And lastly, in part 3, I'll play the entire 1953 movie. But first, or rather second, let's get on with the walk. Just going to quickly mix in the older movie, and past the block on the left was an open area which had been a bomb site in 1953, and it was turned into a temporary park with prefabs on it. Over the road there is a post-war new build before the older Victorian house chimneys can be seen resuming. Phillimore Gardens, the street we're walking along, in 2022 was adjudged the most expensive street in England. Back then it had an average house price of 23.8 million. What's it with all the Phillimore names then? Phillimore Gardens, like surrounding roads, was built on the Phillimore estate, and it was built on land acquired by the Phillimore family in the early 18th century. One of the descendants of the Phillimores was William Phillimore, and after 1779 he converted his farmland, which it had been hitherto, to houses. It was an incredibly successful estate, as you can guess from all the house prices. The facades on the Phillimore Gardens houses are a mixture of brick and stucco, and they were developed in Victorian times. The grandest houses are in the northern section of the street, and those that are on the west side, on the left side here, all have lovely views from their back gardens over Holland Park. Frequent viewers to this video channel will know that I'm obsessed with old maps, and this walk won't be an exception. Here's the ground covered so far, starting at High Street Kensington Station on a modern map, and the very gaudy purple line shows the progress along Kensington High Street. Then I turned right into Phillimore Gardens, and the purple line shows where we got to. So let's mix in an 1860s map. Take a look at where the purple line ran out on the modern map, and it shows where we got to if we were walking this in the 1860s. To the left, to the west, that is, of Phillimore Gardens is Holland Park. As I said, the houses on the left back onto the park, which would make them quite expensive to buy, I'd imagine. Next we'll be turning right into Upper Phillimore Gardens, and then we'll walk the length of it. We'll pass the site of South's Observatory and go left into Campden Hill Road. Actually, it's really worth pausing the video to take a long look at mid-Victorian Kensington on this map. Either you paused the video or you didn't, but I'm going to continue and turn right here. I'll quickly return to the final few frames of the old movie. Luckily the lorry and me are travelling at the same speed. There's the woman in her front garden. Followed by the young girls. Swapping to the other side of the street, the glass awning is still there after all these years. We'll be leaving the former Phillimore estate at the end of this street, but there's one more final Phillimore tale to impart. Where C&A was at first occupied by a terraced frontage on Kensington High Street called Upper Phillimore Place. It was the first development that the family had built and completely changed the character of the hitherto peaceful Kensington High Street. King George III hated Upper Phillimore Place so much that he had the blinds pulled down on his carriage windows if he ever had to pass it. The entire terrace was later replaced in the 20th century by huge mansion blocks.
Detector 1.
Big as the houses in Upper Phillimore Gardens are, they're almost dwarfed by the many enormous trees which line the street. We've passed a few on our way here. Particularly on the northern side, i.e. this side of the street, the houses are very large as well. They have very long gardens backing onto Duchess of Bedford Walk. Now we reach the location of one of the more wacky residents of 19th century Kensington, a man called Sir James South. This block ahead of us is called Campden Hill Court, and it exactly covers the footprint of South's Observatory Garden. At the time, it was acclaimed as the world's finest private observatory. In 1829, South imported the world's largest telescope from France, but he fell out with the installation team, sued them, but lost the court case. Now having to fork out £8,000 in legal fees, in an act of spite, he broke up the instrument and auctioned off his components in his garden. He subsequently commissioned Isambard Kingdom Brunel, yes him, to enlarge his observatory, but quarrelled with Mr. Brunel as well over the bill. South died in 1867 and his land was sold off, only to be remembered in road names. In the reign of Queen Elizabeth I, a large country house with spacious grounds stood in this area. Around 1609, Sir Baptist Hicks bought the house, and in 1628 Hicks was made Viscount Campden, a name he took from a manor he owned in Gloucestershire, and he named the house after himself. Campden Hill Road was then developed near to the house, and it's a rather hilly area and a very rich street. Notable past residents have included the novelist Ford Madox Ford, so good he named himself twice. He lived at number 80, and also the poet Cecil Day Lewis and his family. And his family included his wife, Jewel Balcon, and also the actor Sir Daniel Day Lewis. Land ownership is a long and complicated story in Kensington, but the Pitt estate had been sold on by a descendant of Viscount Campden. And it covers this part of Kensington, which is as well to do as the rest of the area. We're soon to turn right into what the estate originally called Percy Villas, but is now called Sheffield Terrace. Number 58 Sheffield Terrace is set well back from the road. It's a former home of Agatha Christie, and apparently it's particularly outstanding inside. Posh authors aside, nowhere in London was really immune from the Luftwaffe, and on the right here we can see some post-war housing which is quite out of keeping from the style of the rest. William Eales, who was a timber merchant, and Jeremiah Little, who was a builder, had the building lease to develop most of the Pitt estate, granted by Stephen Pitt in 1844. Well, when I say most of the buildings of Sheffield, Terrace, obviously not this glorious 20th century extravaganza on the right. Wow, look at that. But past Horton Street on the right hand side of the road was originally the square plot that included Campden House. The continuing discrepancy between the left-hand side of the road, which was very mid-19th century, and the right-hand side of the road, which was a lot later, can be seen here. But one of the things that can't be seen here is the district and the Circle Line running directly underneath the road. This caused a lot of disruption to the original Sheffield Terrace, but the houses in a Bayswater style were filled in on the left here, and you can hardly notice the join that underneath runs the railway, and above ground the continuing line of the terrace is hardly broken up at all. But ahead of us we can see the much busier Kensington Church Street. The good old 328 to Golders Green. Kensington Church Street is one of the more notable roads of Kensington and traditionally known for its art and antique shops. It's mentioned several times in the Napoleon of Notting Hill by G.K. Chesterton, and until it moved in 1973, the very influential fashion shop Bieber was here, well known to a whole generation. Don't know where all these people have come from all of a sudden. I'm crossing to the sunny side of the street. This pub on the right, the Churchill Arms, is one of the most Instagrammed places in London. Many a visitor to London comes to Kensington Church Street, takes a picture of all the flowers, and then leaves without even having a pint inside. Such is fame. When I said it was a 20-minute walk to Notting Hill Gate from High Street Kensington, I sort of hinted we were going to do the whole walk without interruption. But this part of Kensington Church Street I'm going to speed through a bit. During the aforementioned speeded up section you didn't really miss a lot. There's a lot of building work on the left. And here are some older buildings of Notting Hill Gate ahead. Oh, green person, let's whiz across the road. And there's still building work on the left. But we're coming up into Notting Hill Gate Station, and I think I'll descend the staircase into the station itself. And that's the end of the walk. But not strictly true. I'm going to play the whole of the 1953 movie as promised, and the bit you did see didn't show the exciting Hammersmith Road section at the beginning. So this is the movie in its completeness, without interruption, and I'll bid you a fond goodbye. See you on the next walk.